On a cold autumn night, a young woman walked home alone, and everything changed. A shadow followed her, heavy footsteps, a danger she couldn't see, but felt. Then a man stepped out of the darkness, tall, rugged, wearing an old marine jacket, and beside him, a powerful German shepherd with eyes sharp as steel. The man leaned close and whispered the 6 words that would turn her entire life upside down. "Pretend I'm your father. Right now." She didn't know him. She didn't trust him. But the fear in his voice, and the warning in the dog's growl, told her this was no ordinary stranger. Who was he? Why did he protect her? And what terrible secret was buried in her family for more than 20 years? Stay with me, because what you're about to discover will shock you and maybe remind you that sometimes God sends help in ways we never expect. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from today? And if you enjoy these emotional, faith-filled stories, please subscribe. It means the world to me. The late autumn night settled heavily over the small town of Burlington, Vermont, a place known for quiet streets, red brick buildings, and rows of maple trees that blazed with color every fall. But tonight, the beauty of the season couldn't soften the cold. A sharp wind rolled in from Lake Champlain, sweeping dry leaves across the pavement like scattered shards of rust. Streetlights flickered against the chill, casting long, trembling shadows that made the empty sidewalks feel even more deserted. It was the kind of night when the world seemed to shrink, pressing its silence tightly around anyone still wandering outside. Sarah Miller, a 22-year-old woman with a slender frame, long auburn hair pulled into a loose ponytail, and a face defined by soft cheekbones and expressive hazel eyes, stepped out of the Rusty Bean Cafe after finishing her late shift. Sarah's skin was pale from long hours indoors, and her movements carried the exhaustion of someone who had spent too many nights closing shop. She was gentle with customers, polite but somewhat shy, the kind of young woman whose kindness made her well-liked, but whose quietness often made her appear fragile. Her mother's strict, overprotective nature had shaped much of her personality. Sarah had grown up cautious, rarely taking risks, and it was only recently, working this cafe job, that she had begun to taste a hint of independence. She tugged her denim jacket tighter around her body as the wind bit through the fabric. Her boots clicked softly on the sidewalk as she began the familiar walk home. Usually she enjoyed the solitude, but tonight the air felt heavier, the darkness deeper. Sarah pushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear and checked her phone. 10:54 p.m. Her mother would be awake, worrying as always. She quickened her pace. A sudden sharp crunch behind her froze her mid-step. She turned slightly, not enough to be obvious, but enough to let her peripheral vision catch a shadow moving at the far end of the block. Another footstep followed, slow, deliberate, and heavy, like a boot heel striking concrete. Sarah swallowed hard. Her breathing grew shallow. She clutched her purse and slipped her hand inside, searching for the small canister of pepper spray she always carried. But her fingers trembled so badly that the canister slipped from her grasp and clattered onto the sidewalk, rolling out of reach. "Damn it," she whispered under her breath, bending to retrieve it. But before she could touch it, a new shadow swept over her. A man approached from the opposite side of the street, a large silhouette illuminated by the faint amber glow of the street lamps. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with a broad, muscular build shaped by years of physical labor and military discipline. His jaw was square and lined with a thick, neatly trimmed beard that matched the dark brown of his short, slightly graying hair. His eyes were a piercing steel blue, alert and sharp, scanning everything around him. The lines etched at the corners of his eyes suggested a man who had seen too many things, things that hardened him but also taught him restraint. His movements were measured, calm, controlled. Nothing about him felt reckless. Walking at his side was a German shepherd, large and powerful, with deep brown fur streaked with black along the spine. The dog's ears were perked, posture alert, tail stiff with focus. The dog moved like a trained protector, gliding with quiet confidence. This was Ranger, a retired military working dog, 10 years old but still carrying the strength and authority of his service years. His calm but watchful demeanor hinted at long experience sensing danger long before humans could. The man stepped close enough for Sarah to see the seriousness in his gaze. His voice, when he spoke, was low and rough, carrying the tone of someone used to commanding in life or death situations. "You're in danger. Pretend I'm your dad." Sarah's breath hitched. Her mind raced in panicked confusion, unsure whether to run, scream, or trust the stranger towering over her. But then Ranger stepped forward, positioning himself between Sarah and the distant footsteps behind her. The dog let out a low, resonant growl, deep enough to vibrate in Sarah's chest, controlled enough to show discipline, not aggression. He had detected something, or someone, approaching. A split second later, a black SUV roared around the corner, tires hissing over fallen leaves as it skidded to a stop just 20 feet ahead. Its headlights flashed across the street, momentarily blinding her. The engine idled with a menacing rumble. Two men stepped out, both wearing dark jackets, shoulders stiff, eyes scanning with predatory intent. One was tall with a shaved head and angular features, the other shorter but thick-set, arms bulging beneath his jacket. Their faces had a hardened, streetwise look, the type of men who knew how to intimidate. Sarah instinctively stepped back, but the man beside her placed a firm, steady hand on her shoulder. "Just play along," he murmured. Without hesitation, he raised his voice, strong, fatherly, authoritative. "Come on, honey. Let's get you home, it's late." Ranger moved with him, positioning himself protectively at Sarah's side, body low, ready to react. The men from the SUV paused. Their eyes shifted, first to the tall stranger, then to the dog, then back again. Something about the man's calm confidence, his steadfast stare, made them hesitate. He didn't flinch. He didn't step away. He didn't show fear. Finally, after a tense moment, the taller man muttered something under his breath. Both men retreated into the SUV. The engine revved, and the vehicle pulled away slowly into the night, turning down a side street before disappearing. Sarah exhaled shakily, realizing only then how close she had been to collapsing. The man released her shoulder and turned toward her. Ranger sniffed her hand gently, as if offering comfort. Sarah hesitated, then whispered with a trembling voice, Who are you?" The man looked at her with a softness that contrasted sharply with the rigid soldier he had been seconds earlier. "My name is Ethan Walker," he said quietly. "I was your father's best friend when we were kids." Ranger nudged her hand again, and this time Sarah didn't pull away. The morning sun filtered weakly through the curtains of the Miller apartment, casting pale stripes across the living room floor. Overnight, a thin frost had settled over Burlington, Vermont, coating rooftops and parked cars with a silvery sheen. The cold air still clung to the windows, giving the quiet home a muted stillness, as if the world outside were holding its breath. Sarah Miller stepped out of her bedroom with dark circles under her hazel eyes, her auburn hair loosely tied back. She moved stiffly, the lingering fear from last night evident in her tense shoulders and restless fingers. Despite her slender build and gentle features, there was a new heaviness in the way she walked, a weight left behind by the memory of heavy footsteps, a black SUV, and the steel-blue gaze of Ethan Walker. Her mother, Linda Miller, stood at the stove stirring oatmeal. Linda was a woman in her late 40s, petite with a narrow waist and careful posture. Her chestnut brown hair, streaked with premature gray, was tied in a low bun. Her soft brown eyes, normally warm, now flickered with an anxiety she tried and failed to hide. Years of keeping secrets had etched faint tension lines around her mouth, giving her a look of constant alertness. "Morning, Mom," Sarah said quietly. Linda turned, her eyes scanning her daughter from head to toe, searching for injury. "You look pale, sweetie. Everything okay?" Sarah hesitated only a moment before telling her everything, how she had been followed, how she dropped her pepper spray, how a tall, rugged man with a commanding presence appeared with a German shepherd at his side, how he acted as if he knew danger before even seeing it, how he claimed to be her father's childhood friend. As the story unfolded, Linda's face drained of color. The wooden spoon slipped from her fingers and clattered against the pot. "Sarah," Linda whispered, voice trembling, "you cannot see that man again." Sarah blinked. "What?" "Mom, he saved me." Linda shook her head violently. "I mean it. Stay away from him. People like him. He brings danger." "He said he knew Dad," Sarah pressed. "Why would you—" "I said no." Linda's voice cracked unexpectedly, louder than she intended. Her hand trembled as she steadied herself on the counter. "Please, Sarah. Promise me you won't go near him." The sudden sharpness in her tone stunned Sarah. Linda rarely raised her voice, and more importantly, she looked terrified. Not worried, terrified. Sarah opened her mouth to ask more, but Linda turned away, ending the conversation with the finality of a slammed door. Hours later, Sarah sat cross-legged on her bed with her laptop open, her pale fingers tapping nervously on the keyboard. The guilt of disobeying her mother tugged at her, but the curiosity and fear were stronger. She typed in David Miller, USMC. After several irrelevant results, she found an old archive image. Two young men in marine uniforms. One was her father, David Miller, a kind-eyed man with sandy brown hair, a lean, athletic build, and a warm smile that reached his eyes. His posture radiated integrity and quiet confidence. Beside him stood a younger Ethan Walker, instantly recognizable even decades earlier. His features were sharper, jaw clean-shaven, intense steel-blue eyes filled with a disciplined fire. Even in the past, he looked like someone who had carried responsibility far too early, someone shaped by hardship long before he earned his uniform. But what froze Sarah's breath was the dog sitting between them, a military working German shepherd with deep brown fur and intelligent, alert eyes. The resemblance to Ranger was unmistakable. Her heart thudded in her chest. She leaned closer to the screen, whispering to herself, "Mom, what are you hiding?" That afternoon, as the cold wind swept across downtown Burlington, Sarah headed toward the cafe for her shift. She pulled her jacket close, her slender frame shivering slightly as she passed a row of red brick buildings glazed with frost. She was almost at the door when a familiar large silhouette appeared from around the corner. Ethan Walker. Today he wore a dark green military-style jacket, the broad shoulders and straight posture making it clear he had just recently left service. His beard was trimmed neatly, framing a jaw hardened by discipline and past trauma. His eyes, alert, scanning, softened slightly when they met hers. At his side trotted Ranger, the 10-year-old German shepherd whose stride remained steady, powerful, and alert despite his age. His black and tan coat shimmered in the cold light, and his ears perked as he recognized Sarah. He approached and gently nudged her hand, a silent greeting filled with reassurance. "I figured you might be heading to work," Ethan said, stopping a respectful distance away. His voice was deep and worn, shaped by years of commanding troops and witnessing things he wished he could forget. "Did you follow me?" Sarah asked, not accusing, simply uncertain. "No," Ethan said calmly. "Ranger and I were already in the area. He picked up a scent from last night. He's been restless since dawn." Ranger let out a low, soft whine, as if confirming it. Sarah swallowed. "Last night, those men. Do you know who they were?" Ethan's gaze shifted, his jaw tightening. "Not yet, but I know what they were capable of." Sarah hesitated. "Why are you here, Ethan? Why now?" Ethan took a breath, shoulders lowering slightly. For a moment he looked tired, like a man carrying ghosts of battles past. "I just returned from deployment," he said. "And when I came back, I started looking into your father's death again. Something about the report never sat right." He glanced at Ranger. "And last night, Ranger smelled traces of gun oil and a chemical accelerant used in professional hits." Sarah's pulse quickened. "So my dad—" Ethan met her eyes. "His death wasn't the accident they said it was." His voice hardened. "And the person looking for you is someone with power. Someone who doesn't want the past coming to light." Ranger stood closer to Sarah, as if shielding her with his body. Fear, confusion, and disbelief washed over her all at once. "But who?" she began. Ethan shook his head. "I won't say more until I'm certain. I won't put you in danger with half-truths." Then Ranger barked softly, one sharp warning note. Ethan's eyes narrowed, scanning the street behind her. "We're not alone," he murmured. The wind picked up sharply that evening, sweeping through Burlington's narrow streets and rattling the loose signs of small shops closing for the night. A pale moon hung over the rooftops, casting long shadows across the sidewalks. Sarah Miller, wrapped in her denim jacket and clutching her bag close, stepped outside the cafe after finishing her shift. Tonight her steps were quicker, her hazel eyes more alert. The fear from the previous night lingered beneath her skin like a cold burn. Ranger, the 10-year-old German shepherd with a thick black and tan coat and steady, intelligent gaze, waited beside Ethan like a vigilant sentinel. The dog's posture stiffened the moment Sarah approached. His ears twitched, catching sounds no human could detect, and his deep brown eyes locked onto a figure across the street. Sarah followed his gaze. A man she didn't recognize, a tall, lanky stranger with a scruffy beard and a heavy brown jacket, stood by the lamppost, pretending to look at his phone. His posture was too stiff, too attentive, his eyes flickering up toward her every few seconds. He didn't seem like someone passing by. He looked like someone waiting. "Is he one of them?" Sarah whispered. Ethan Walker stepped forward, his broad frame partially shielding her. In the dim light, the lines along his rugged face, shaped by war, loss, and hardened loyalty, became sharper. His steel blue eyes narrowed with instinctive suspicion. "Maybe," Ethan murmured. "Ranger noticed him before I did." Ranger let out a low rumble, not barking yet, but warning. The man across the street quickly turned and walked away, disappearing behind a row of parked cars. Sarah felt the tension coil inside her. "That's not the first one today," she said quietly. 3 different men hung around the cafe, and she hesitated. A red pickup truck drove by my apartment twice this morning. At the mention of the truck, Ranger suddenly growled, a deeper, sharper sound than before. His fur bristled along his spine. He recognizes the scent, Ethan said. Whoever was in that truck, Ranger crossed paths with them last night. Sarah swallowed hard, fear tightening her chest. They decided to walk her home, sticking to well-lit streets. As they approached the apartment complex, Ethan slowed. Ranger trotted ahead, sniffing the air with laser-focused attention. Linda's house sat at the edge of a residential block, a modest 2-story home with faded blue paint and a flower bed she tended every spring. Tonight the yard felt colder, the shadows heavier. Ranger walked straight to the front window, nose pressed to the soil of the flower bed. His tail stiffened. He pawed the dirt once, then again, more urgently. Ethan immediately knelt beside him. "What is it, buddy?" he asked softly. Ranger dug a few inches and uncovered something small and metallic, a black listening device, barely the size of Sarah's thumb. Ethan picked it up with a grim expression. The tiny red indicator light was still blinking. Sarah felt her stomach drop. "Oh my God!" Ethan stood, his tall, muscular frame blocking the wind. His jaw tightened, the scar near his right eyebrow pulling slightly. A mark from an explosion years ago during a mission that claimed 2 of his teammates. That loss had forged him into the protector he was now. "They found you," he said quietly. "They found both of you." Sarah felt her chest tighten. But why? Why us? Why my mom? Ethan glanced toward the darkened house, then back at her. "Because your father knew something he wasn't supposed to." He led her to the small bench by the porch. With Ranger sitting between them like a steadfast guardian, Ethan finally began to explain. "Your dad, David Miller. He worked in the military logistics division. His job was to monitor supply chains and contracting. It sounds boring, but it put him close to people with power." Ethan paused, jaw tight. "And close to people who were misusing it." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. Ethan took a slow breath. "Your father uncovered discrepancies, a series of defense contracts going to shell companies, millions of dollars unaccounted for. He traced all of it back to one man, Charles Whitford." Sarah frowned. "I've never heard of him." "You wouldn't have," Ethan said. "Whitford is a federal official, wealthy, untouchable. The kind of man who hides his corruption behind influence. Your father gathered enough evidence to expose him." Sarah's breath caught. "So Dad was going to report him?" Ethan nodded, but before he could, the accident happened. The word accident sat between them like poison. Ranger nudged Sarah's hand, sensing her trembling. "My mom knew," Sarah whispered. "Didn't she?" Ethan's eyes softened. "Yes. Whitford had eyes everywhere. The moment your father died, Linda grabbed you and disappeared. Changed your last name, moved here under the radar." Sarah pressed a hand to her forehead, overwhelmed. Her mother's fear finally made sense, but it felt like her world was tilting. Ranger suddenly lifted his head sharply, ears alert, his gaze fixed on the end of the street. A dark silhouette moved between 2 parked cars. "We need to go inside," Ethan said quietly. "Now." Night fell heavily over Burlington, blanketing the quiet suburban streets in a tense, uneasy stillness. A storm had brushed through earlier, leaving the air damp and cold. Water glistened on the pavement, reflecting the pale glow of streetlights like shattered glass. As Sarah Miller walked home, her slender frame wrapped tightly in her jacket, The shadows around her seemed deeper than usual. Her hazel eyes darted cautiously along the sidewalks, every sound amplified in her mind. When she reached the front porch, she felt her stomach sink. The door was slightly open. "Mom?" she whispered. No answer. Her pulse quickened as she pushed the door open. The living room, usually neat and warm, had been torn apart. Cushions were slashed open, drawers dumped out, picture frames shattered across the floor. The lamp lay on its side, its light flickering weakly. Footsteps pounded behind her. Ethan Walker rushed in with Ranger close on his heels. Ethan's tall, broad-shouldered figure cut through the doorway like a shield. His jaw clenched, beard bristling, steel-blue eyes sweeping the room with the trained precision of a man who had searched crime scenes and war zones alike. Ranger moved beside him, 10 years old but powerful, his black and tan coat slicked back, ears forward, nose twitching. Ranger lowered his head and began sniffing the floor aggressively, moving from overturned furniture to the far corner of the room. Sarah followed anxiously, her hands trembling as she held them against her chest. Ranger stopped at the small wooden table by the wall. He pawed it once, then growled. Ethan knelt beside him and lifted the edge of the tablecloth. A single playing card lay beneath it, an ace of spades, its edges smeared with dirt. On the back, crude handwriting read, "Stay quiet, stay hidden." Sarah gasped. My God, they were in here. Ethan's expression hardened. His voice dropped to a deadly calm. They're escalating. Ranger stepped closer to Sarah, nudging her hand with his nose as if reminding her to breathe. The next morning, Sarah drove alone toward the cafe, her nerves stretched thin. The icy wind scraped across her windshield as she turned onto Main Street. Her phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. "Let me know when you get there." Before she could reply, a black SUV suddenly swerved into her lane. Sarah's heart slammed into her ribs. The SUV accelerated, forcing her toward the curb. She heard Ethan's voice in her mind. "If someone tries to box you in, don't freeze. Control the wheel. Create space." She inhaled sharply and turned the wheel sharply right, letting her tires scrape the curb before spinning back into the lane. The SUV surged forward again. Suddenly, a second engine roared from behind. Ethan's truck. Ranger stood in the back seat with his paws on the window, barking ferociously. His deep, ringing bark echoed across the street like a warning siren. The SUV veered off, course, startled, then sped away down a side street. Sarah pulled over, shaking. Ethan jumped out of his truck. "You okay?" he asked, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. She nodded, though her breath trembled. Ranger leaned his head out of the window and whined softly as if scolding her for driving alone. That night, Ethan brought Sarah to an abandoned industrial lot at the edge of town. Rusting metal containers and broken concrete surrounded them under dim security lights. The cold seeped into the ground, but Sarah felt safer knowing Ranger was there. Ethan faced her, hands raised in a non-threatening stance. Self-defense. Basics first. Sarah took a shaky breath. Her slender build wasn't made for fighting, but determination flickered across her pale face. When she stepped forward and lost her balance, Ranger immediately moved to block her fall, pressing his warm body against her knees. She steadied herself with a small laugh, grateful. Ethan showed her how to break free from a wrist grab. When he reached too quickly, Ranger growled low, not aggressively, but protectively. "Easy, boy," Ethan murmured with a faint smile. "We're just practicing." Ranger's gaze stayed locked on Ethan's hands, making sure no movement crossed the line. They practiced for over an hour, Ranger assisting like a seasoned instructor, standing behind Sarah when she needed grounding, alerting her with a bark when Ethan approached from behind, teaching her the sense of presence a threat might have. Ethan and Sarah finally began walking back toward the truck. That was when three men stepped out from behind the shipping containers. The first was tall and thin, with hollow cheeks and a nervous twitch in his left eye. The second was bulkier, square-jawed with a shaved head. The third, shorter but muscular, wore a leather jacket and cracked his knuckles with a smirk. Ethan stepped forward instantly, shielding Sarah. Ranger positioned himself at Ethan's side, teeth bared. The men lunged. Ranger attacked first, fast as lightning. His powerful body slammed into the tallest attacker, knocking him flat. The man screamed as Ranger pinned him with sharp, controlled precision. Ethan fought the other two, moving with the efficiency of a trained Marine. Blocks, strikes, takedowns. But the bulkier man slashed a knife across Ethan's shoulder, opening a shallow but painful wound. Sarah cried out, covering her mouth as Ethan staggered. "It's okay," he gritted out. "I've had worse." Ranger disengaged from his attacker and rushed back, snarling at the remaining threat. The attackers fled into the darkness. Sarah rushed to Ethan, eyes wide with panic. "This is all because of me." But Ethan managed a faint smile despite the blood trickling down his arm. "No, this is because of your father." Ranger nuzzled Sarah's leg gently, grounding her. She didn't cry, but she almost did. The night air outside Linda Miller's small Vermont home was crisp and cold, carrying the smell of pine and distant wood smoke. Inside, the warm glow of the kitchen light contrasted sharply with the tension that filled the room. Sarah guided Ethan in, one arm supporting his uninjured side while Ranger pressed close to his leg, watching every shadow as if danger might emerge from it. Ethan looked pale beneath the scruff of his short beard, his usually steady posture stiff from the fresh stitches along his shoulder. His rugged face, marked by years of combat tours, sleepless nights, and sun-weathered deployments, softened only when he glanced at Sarah. Despite the pain, he stayed upright, unwilling to appear weak in front of her or Linda. Linda appeared in the doorway, her brown hair streaked with gray, eyes wide with fear the moment she saw the blood stain on Ethan's shirt. She rushed forward. "Oh, God. Ethan, you're hurt." Her voice cracked, not from surprise but from 20 years of bottled grief. Sarah stepped between them gently. "Mom, we were ambushed. Ranger saved us. Ethan protected me." Ranger, hearing his name, trotted forward and sat between the women, tail settled but posture alert. The German shepherd seemed to sense the fragile emotional weight in the room, his deep brown eyes flicking between mother and daughter, as though ensuring neither broke apart. Ethan lowered himself into a chair, wincing. "Linda, it's time. No more hiding." Linda's breath trembled. Something inside her finally broke. She sat opposite him, hands clasped tightly, knuckles white. "Then you should know everything." Linda began speaking, her voice trembling at first. "David, your father, wasn't just a logistics officer," she said. "He discovered financial discrepancies tied to Charles Whitford. Huge contracts, false invoices, military equipment that never existed, money laundered through federal programs." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. "You mean all of this because Dad tried to expose him?" Linda nodded slowly, tears welling. "Your father prepared a full dossier. He planned to report it through protected channels. But before he could, he sent a copy to the only person he trusted." Her eyes landed on Ethan. Ethan inhaled sharply, his jaw tensing in pain, not from the wound, but from the truth. "I never got it. I was deployed overseas. The package must have been intercepted or rerouted. I had no idea David tried to reach me before he died. Linda wiped her cheeks with trembling fingers. When David died, I knew it wasn't an accident. Whitford had the power to erase anyone. So I ran. Changed our names, moved across states, anything to keep Sarah safe. Sarah's breath hitched as the weight of 20 years of secrets settled into her bones. Ethan exhaled deeply, then pulled his old military duffel from beside the chair. The bag was worn from years of travel, the canvas faded and edges frayed. From inside, he retrieved a compact decoding device, military-grade, matte black, with faint scratches along its casing. It looked like a relic from covert operations. "This," Ethan said, "is how we finish what your father started." He placed his battered laptop on the table, connected the decoder, and began feeding in the fragments of files they had gathered. Emails David had saved, encrypted logs from old hard drives, photographs Ethan recovered from David's footlocker. Ranger settled near the door, ears rotating like radar dishes, guarding the room as if knowing the house held something dangerous and precious at the same time. Lines of code rolled across the screen as Ethan decrypted hidden folders. Slowly, piece by piece, David's dossier reassembled itself. Contracts, financial trails, communications proving Whitford had siphoned millions, links to organized crime, evidence of coordinated cover-ups. Sarah covered her mouth. "Dad, he died trying to do the right thing. And he trusted me to protect you," Ethan said, voice thick with regret. "I failed him once. I won't fail again." Once the reconstruction finished, Ethan transferred everything to a secure drive. "I'm sending this to someone I trust, someone clean." He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Captain Reed," he said, when a deep male voice answered. "It's Walker. I'm sending you something big. Federal-level corruption. You're the only one who won't bury it." Reed had served with Ethan, a tall, disciplined man with a reputation for integrity. Though he wasn't physically present, Ethan's tone said everything. This was a man who could be relied on when the stakes were highest. Within hours, Reed confirmed receipt. Within a week, Charles Whitford was arrested in a full-scale federal corruption sweep. His influence collapsed instantly. The men who had hunted Sarah vanished, no longer protected. For the first time in decades, Linda slept without fear. A week later, on a misty morning at the Vermont National Cemetery, Sarah stood between Ethan and Linda before a simple white gravestone bearing her father's name, David Miller, USMC. The sun crested over the horizon, painting streaks of gold across the dew-covered grass. Sarah's hand trembled as she touched the stone. "Dad, I know everything now." Linda wiped her eyes, leaning her head against her daughter's shoulder. Ranger lay down beside the grave, pressing his head to the earth in a gesture so gentle and reverent, it broke Sarah's heart all over again. Ethan stepped closer, his voice low. "I couldn't protect David, but I'll protect you, always." Sarah reached out, taking both her mother's and Ethan's hands. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel alone. She felt whole, held between a mother who had sacrificed everything and the man who had become the father figure fate had delayed. As the first full beam of sunlight touched them, Sarah breathed deeply. A new dawn had begun. A real family at last. Sometimes, the greatest miracles don't arrive with lightning from the skies or angels descending in bright light. Sometimes, God sends them quietly, in the form of a loyal dog who never leaves your side, a mother who sacrifices everything without asking for praise, and a man who returns at the right moment, carrying the courage and love of those we've lost. In the darkest nights of life, when fear feels bigger than we are, God often places people on our path, not to remove the storm, but to walk through it with us. Just like Ethan, who came back at the very moment Sarah needed protection. Just like Ranger, whose faithfulness reminded her that love can be a shield. And just like David, whose truth survived even after he was gone. All of it is a reminder that God's miracles don't always shout, they whisper. And maybe, just maybe, the sunrise at the end of this story wasn't just a new beginning for Sarah, but a quiet message from above that healing is possible, that truth will rise, and that none of us ever walk alone. Not when faith lights the way. As you finish this story, I invite you to take a moment and think about the blessings in your own life. The people who protect you, the ones who pray for you, the ones God has placed beside you for a reason. May God bless you, protect you, and guide you through every sunrise ahead. And may every challenge you face become a doorway to something brighter. If this story touched your heart, please like the video to help more people feel its warmth. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us where you're watching from and what part of the story moved you the most. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring, faith-filled stories every week. May God's grace be with you and your family today and always. Amen.